Hello everyone. Today I'll talk about memory, but not just as a brain function or a mental trick, more like memory connected to astrology and occult wisdom. So I want to share some historical perspectives and symbolic connections that reveal how memory was once seen as part of the very structure of the stars and planets. Nowadays, we usually think of memory as a biological thing, neurons firing, brain chemistry doing its thing. But in the ancient world, especially within astrology and occult traditions, memory was more than that. It was a spiritual faculty and sometimes even a magical tool. A lot of our modern ideas about memory and the universe actually go way back, all the way to ancient Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and so on. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle laid down the early groundwork, even if they didn't always agree on the details. Now, Plato had this idea that memory isn't just about what happens in one lifetime. It's more like the soul is remembering knowledge it already knows from before it was born. Like truth is something we're all trying to remember, not learn from scratch. He didn't get into astrology directly, but his concept of the world soul ended up inspiring later thinkers to see a connection between the stars and the mind. Aristotle took a more down-to-earth approach. He was interested in how memory worked biologically, how impressions were formed, how the intellect processed them. But even his ideas later got intertwined into astrological philosophy, especially when thinkers started linking the body, the soul, and the heavens. Then came the Neoplatonists, people like Plotinus and Iamblichus, and they really ran with it. They believed the soul travels through the planetary spheres before it's born, picking up impressions and knowledge from each one. And through ritual magic and astrological practice, one could kind of reverse that journey, so send back through the cosmos and access that deeper hidden memory. And then there's the Hermetica, rich body of writings that blends Greek philosophy with Egyptian sacred science. The Hermetic texts teach that the human mind is a spark of the divine, directly connected to the cosmos. And the Hermetic philosophers of Greco-Egyptian Alexandria didn't see memory as just storing facts. They described it as a kind of recollection, a remembering of the soul's divine origin. And one passage from the Corpus Hermeticum says it best. When the body gets its bulk and drags the soul down to the body's grossness, the soul gives birth to forgetting. And it no longer shares in the beautiful and the good. The forgetting becomes wise. Now, this is from Corpus Hermeticum 11, also known as Mind unto Hermes. So in their view, forgetting wasn't just losing information, it was falling into material ignorance, and remembering was a return to the divine mind, a kind of spiritual salvation. All of these perspectives, from Plato to Plotinus to the Hermetic tradition, point to the same idea, that memory isn't just a brain function, it's a spiritual faculty. It connects us to something bigger, something timeless, and by working with it through philosophy, astrology, ritual, or reflection, we are doing more than just remembering our past, we are remembering our place in the cosmos. Now, this celestial idea carried over into astrology, where different planets were believed to influence different parts of the mind and memory. Mercury, or Hermes in Greek tradition, was the god of language, logic, writing, and memory. Now, Mercury in particular stands out as the planet most closely linked to memory in magical and astrological texts. The moon governed emotional and imaginative memory, our dreams, our subconscious impressions. Saturn ruled deep memory, things like lineage, karma, and the structures shaping our lives. And Jupiter, the planet of higher knowledge, helped transform memory into wisdom. In traditional astrology, cognitive faculties, including memory, are primarily governed by Mercury and Saturn, with the Sun also contributing as a source of vital energy and mental focus. In Vedic astrology, the first house representing the self and mind is commonly associated with memory functions. Memory impairment is observed when Mercury is placed in mutable signs or when it occupies cadent houses, so the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th house, maybe because of their transitional or changing and somewhat challenging nature. Also, Mercury afflicted by malefic planets like Saturn, Mars, or Rahu, the North Node, or even when conjunct or aspected by the Moon or Jupiter under certain conditions, can weaken memory capacity. Now, absence of any aspect to the ascendant can debilitate Mercury's mnemonic influence. A pronounced Pisces element in the natal chart may also be indicative of diffused mental focus, contributing to forgetfulness or impaired memory recall. Now, strong and retentive memory is indicated by a moon that is well dignified and receives benefic aspects, mostly again from Mercury. Now, Mercury itself, when placed in angular or succeeding houses free from malefic afflictions and receiving supportive aspects, is a strong indicator of enhanced cognitive retention and memory. Classical texts in Vedic astrology, such as Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, emphasize the importance of Mercury's strength and affliction in determining mental acuity and memory function. In ancient Egypt, Mercury was connected to Thoth, the god who invented writing, language, astronomy, and memory itself. He was said to record every soul's deeds and was called the Lord of Divine Books. And this tradition carried on through medieval magical texts, especially in the Arabic grimoire called the Picatrix. And the Picatrix, written around the 11th century, also known by its Arabic title meaning the aim of the wise, is a compendium of planetary and astrological magic. And it includes detailed instructions for invoking Mercury to boost memory, among other things. And here's a snippet from one such ritual. May God bless you, good Lord Mercury, you who are truthful, perceptive, intelligent, the sage and instructor of every kind of writing, arithmetic, computation, and science of heaven and earth. I conjure you, so that you will pour on me the powers of your spirit, so that I am capable and prepared to apprehend the sciences and the wisdoms. Keep away from me that which diminishes intelligence and gives rise to forgetfulness. This is from Book 3, Chapter 7, and this kind of ritual would usually be performed on a Wednesday, which is Mercury's day, during Mercury's hour, with a talisman engraved with his symbol, incense burning, and a spoken invocation. In these traditions, memory wasn't just something happening inside one's head. It was something felt and lived, embodied in symbols, rituals, and even timed by the stars. Practitioners used all kinds of tools to work with memory: talismans crafted at specific astrological moments, memory palaces designed to follow the order of the planets, rituals carefully timed to planetary hours and days, and the Kabbalistic tree of life, which acted like a symbolic map for memory itself. And you could think of these as mnemonic cosmologies, systems that use cosmic symbols to help train and expand memory, making it not just a mental skill, but a spiritual practice. For ancient astrologers and magicians, memory wasn't just about holding on to facts or personal stories. It was way bigger than that. To remember meant more than just thinking clearly. It was about realigning yourself with divine order itself. In Hermeticism, forgetting wasn't just a slip-up, it was kind of fall. And remembering, well, that was a powerful return, a kind of magical liberation. And there's a saying from the Hermetic tradition, what the soul forgets in the descent, it must recall in its ascent. So whether it was through calling on planets, crafting talismans, or diving deep into sacred texts, these ancient practices saw memory as a sacred act. Not just remembering facts, but remembering who we really are, where we come from, and our place in the immense unfolding cosmos. So the god Thoth was worshipped as divine scribe, the keeper of writing, wisdom, and what we might call cosmic memory. To the Egyptians, hieroglyphs weren't just letters or words. They were living symbols, each one being a vessel of divine truth. And texts like a Book of the Dead consider a worldview where the heart, not the brain, was seen as the center of memory and intelligence. That's why heart scarabs, those small sacred amulets, were placed over the chest during burial. Their job was to help the soul speak truth during the judgment in the afterlife. So it wasn't just about remembrance, it was also about spiritual accountability. In Babylon, there was a similar theme with Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing, also associated with Mercury. Nabu was considered the scribe of fate. His priests kept careful records of celestial events, essentially creating an archive of the heavens. And this was a kind of divine bookkeeping, tracking memory on a cosmic scale. It is interesting how Babylonian magicians used incantations that actually began with the command, remember. It wasn't metaphorical, it was an invocation, calling on the gods, the spirits, the elements, not just to act, but to remember, to awaken what had been written into the structure of the universe. Now, while the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians didn't exactly talk about memory the way we do, and definitely not in terms of fixed stars, their ideas eventually evolved into something strong in the medieval and Renaissance occult world. And one of the clearest examples of this is the Bohemian fixed stars. These are a set of stars that later occultists, especially people like Agrippa, traced back to Hermes Trismegistus, and they were seen as the roots or the hidden source of the planet's magical powers. These weren't just pretty points of light, they were considered cosmic pressure points, each tied to a specific planetary force, metal, or stone. So Antares, for example, is linked with Mars and Jupiter, and in magical texts, talismans made under Antares were said to boost intellect and memory and even offer protection from harmful spirits. Now that's a direct link between a celestial body and the inner life of the mind. Other stars like Alphecca, Princeps, or Mencken have strong Mercury associations, and Mercury, as we know, rules communication, memory, and learning. And these stars became important for magical practices involving writing, study, and manuscript culture, especially during times when texts were seen as spiritual tools, not just information. In a way, they acted like celestial bookmarks, holding memory on a universal scale. They anchored cycles of fate, kingship, and cosmic timing, the kind of memory that spanned civilizations. Now, Carl Jung had a really unique take on astrology and the occult. He didn't see them as literal sciences, but more like symbolic languages or ways the unconscious mind speaks to us. For Jung, memory wasn't just a personal thing. He believed in something he called the collective unconscious, a kind of shared memory space made up of images, myths, and archetypes that all humans carry deep in the psyche. And from that perspective, astrology and occult traditions act like ancient memory banks, storing symbols that connect us to those universal patterns. And he once said something like, "The astrological symbols contain the archetypes of the collective unconscious in a highly condensed and accessible form." In other words, those planetary signs and mythic figures aren't just old superstitions, they're shortcuts into deep psychological truths. When we engage with these symbols, we're not just learning about astrology or tarot, we're actually unlocking forgotten parts of ourselves. Not just memories stored in our brains, but the ones buried way deeper, the ones we've inherited, the ones that shape our dreams, instincts, and patterns. In books like Psychology and Alchemy, Jung shows how these occult systems mirror our inner world. And by working with them consciously, we can bring unconscious material into the light, which is basically what he called individuation, or the lifelong journey of becoming who we really are. Now back to the world of occultism. In the writings of people like Elena Petrovna Blavatsky or Aleister Crowley, memory also had a deeper, more mysterious meaning. Now, Blavatsky talked about the Akashic records. So imagine a kind of invisible library where everything that's ever happened or been thought or felt is recorded. Not just for one person, but for all of existence. It's kind of weird, the idea that memory exists outside of our minds, almost like it's laced into the fabric of the universe itself. Now, she also believed that with enough training, through meditation, discipline, and intuition, one could actually tap into that memory, not just our own past, but the memory of humanity or even of the soul. Then Crowley, he had a more practical, magical spin. He wrote about something he called magical memory. Basically, the idea that if you're serious about spiritual practice, you can start to remember not just your past in this life, but past lives too. It's like building a memory across lifetimes and across identities. He saw memory as something you could work with, almost like a muscle, especially through rituals, symbols, and astrology. So in their view, memory isn't something that just happens to us, it's something we participate in. It connects us to the bigger patterns, to fate, to the stars, to the self across time. And maybe most importantly, it challenges the idea that we are these isolated little beings just bumping around in the present moment. Instead, they're saying, no, we are part of a much longer story. And memory, in that sense, is how we start to remember who we really are. To conclude, memory through times was seen as far more than just remembering facts or experiences. It was a cosmic faculty, a spiritual gift linked with planetary energies, fixed stars, and the very structure of the universe itself. So I'll leave you with a quote attributed to the Roman philosopher and orator Marcus Tulio Cicero, who once said, "Memory is the treasury and guardian of all things." It kind of reminds us that memory isn't just about the past. It's the key to holding and unlocking all the knowledge and wisdom we carry as humans. Thank you for being here today. Maybe this will inspire you to look at memory and the universe in a whole new light. So please subscribe, press the like button, let me know what you think about this topic, and I will see you next week. Bye.